Hello there, and finally welcome back to the Bomberman Retrospective. I know it's been more than a little while, but they give you the TLDR. Life be lifin', and hit film became even more trash to use over time, which led to me constantly holding myself back from doing some of the things I really wanted to do in an attempt to both wait for things to improve on the life front and my ability to make videos. I really do want these to be the best I can make them, and now I'm finally comfortable with continuing this series. So sit back, because today we have Bomberman 93, a game I've heard get a lot of praise over the years, but I've only ever played a few times before making this. Let's see if it holds up, or if its expectations are way more than what it can live up to. This game's development featured both talent who have worked on previous games and some new faces who would continue working on the series in the future. That kinda makes this game the culmination of what came before it and a vision into the future. The 93 in the title was to signify that the series would be a yearly one from this point forward, and it was even released in 92 in Japan like how most sports games do it. Which is something I never quite understood, but America got the game in the correct year, so it doesn't really matter anyway. Over the years, I've realized just how much I'd enjoy interviewing some of these developers my damn self in order to get more information on what the thought process was behind some of these games. But since I can't speak Japanese and I'm literally a nobody, it's very unlikely, but especially with a game that left such an impact on the franchise as this one did, I'd love to be able to know what it was like to develop. Until we know more, it's just kind of fun to look at the credits and see who returned and who'd stick around. The story of this game isn't complicated, but it can be very puzzling if you try to connect it back to everything else. Black Bomber is at it again. This time he's stolen 7 vital chips from what the manual calls the Pan-Galactic Mother supercomputer. And no clue what the fuck it does, but it can be best assumed it handles the power and upkeep of this planet from the opening cutscene. After distributing them across various planets, the Pan-Galactic Federal Bureau calls upon White Bomber, who in this story is the PGFB's best detective. I like the fact that this one has a bit more to it than some of the other games we've talked about. Having a bigger scope by making it a galactic adventure is really fun, but it feels like with every game we cover that every game is its own universe entry on one of the iceberg images starts making a lot more sense. This is definitely only an issue if you care about lore, but it's very weird how separate from even the other PC Engine game this one feels. No mention of the Doctor, his daughter, or even Bomberman getting framed for Black Bomber's crimes. This episodic feel definitely makes each game more unique, which is a good thing, but I'd be lying if I said a part of me didn't wish these games connected a bit better. Graphics-wise, you can tell this is their second game on the PC Engine because they make even better use of it than they ever did before. Every world is not only bright and colorful, but very detailed, allowing for all of them to feel distinct in their own way. They're all supposed to be different planets in this game, so the uniqueness was kinda necessary for what they were trying to do, and it keeps the game interesting by making you want to see what the next one might be. Enemy and boss designs are also a step up, with each of them showing even more personality than before, and considering just how many of them are in this game, it's an impressive feat. The bosses in particular have very interesting designs. Continuing to make them huge like in the 1990 game helps as it allows their sprites to be very expressive. It's not nearly as off the wall as later games would get, but they still look great nonetheless. They even get to show them off a bit more, as much like Bomberman 2, there's splash screens after every boss. But instead of being cutscenes that progress the story, it's just Bomberman chilling with said boss. Some of these were changed depending on the region, but all in all they look really nice. Speaking of Bomberman himself, he's still rocking the chubbier design that games of this time used. But this would also be the last time he sports this design as far as I'm aware. I'm gonna miss him, not gonna lie. He looked a little weird to me at first, but he's really grown on me over time and it's kinda sad to see him go. Looking at the Japanese box art, you can see a sort of fusion between him and his more modern design. I'm not quite sure how I'd describe the American one though. It's not bad, but not particularly that good either. I just can't quite describe how this art style makes me feel. Musically, if you've been following this retrospective, you already know what's up, and Jun Jakuma put her foot in this shit all the way down to her ankle. My favorite OST out of the games that we've looked at so far used to be Bomberman 2, but after playing this all the way through, it's definitely taken that spot. Damn near every track is a banger and really help with the frustration that some of the later worlds in the game can cause. Its best trait is just how memorable and catchy it is. I still find myself humming the music to the point that it fights with the Bomberman Hero soundtrack for dominance over my brain, which is why I can't fucking wait to get to that one too. Every aspect of the presentation is firing on all cylinders with this one, so let's see if the gameplay can stack up. If you've played a Bomberman game before, there isn't that much new in this aspect. This isn't a bad thing though, as they improve on gameplay concepts introduced in earlier titles and might just be the best one so far in this aspect, until like the last world, but we'll get to that. Back to a full 8 worlds unlike the 6 in Bomberman 2, this game attempts to make them more unique by adding gimmicks like Bomber Boy did, however they don't go about it in the same way. Instead of each world having its own unique gimmick, it's more streamlined to everyone having a variation of a teleporter. They aren't all used in the same way though, and some even require them in order to fully explore the levels. It sounds very simple, but actually does go a long way to keep the gameplay interesting. Boredom is a lot less likely with this game though, as the enemies have been buffed in both numbers and unique abilities. You have the original enemies from earlier games returning and a host of newer enemies that seem to change with every planet. I love this way of introducing new enemies, as it makes them seem like either the native creatures of that planet or just the respective boss's personal henchmen. Speaking of which, bosses return in this game and are better than ever. Each of them is unique now, instead of repeating a few of them like the first PC Engine game did. They all have different patterns the player has to learn, and each of them brings an amount of personality not really seen in earlier titles, especially since you get that splash screen after each one. Even the final boss feels less frustrating this time around and more like a tough but beatable challenge with the right items. Unfortunate I can't say the same about the world that comes before it. As I alluded to earlier, the final world of this game is, in my opinion at least, the very worst part of this game. Difficulty-wise, the game is harder than Bomberman 2, but leading up to this point, it felt more like a fun challenge rather than frustrating. This changes in the very last world, Planet Techno. This game does what many others do for their final levels, which is throwing enemies from previous levels at you in order to test the skills you've gained. However, a lot of this game's enemies don't exactly feel built for that. There's a lot of enemies this time around that feel like they weren't supposed to be in the same stage. You'll be trying to take care of both an enemy that can walk through shit and one that can fly over shit coming directly at you. Couple it with enemies that can destroy your bombs by shooting them from a distance, take 2 or more hits to kill, and chase you at a crazy speed, and it's partially why I took that initial break from this series that turned into the much longer one. I felt like I really needed a break after that, and full disclosure, I only beat it this time by using the password system. Even the items that have been a big help for the whole game beforehand don't feel like they make much of a difference here. This is where only having one power up per level becomes a problem, because a lot of the times you'll end up with either something you don't want at that moment or something you already have, but its effects don't stack, so it's basically useless. I don't quite understand how this happened, because the game felt fairly balanced beforehand. I don't hate difficulty, but I do hate it when it feels unfair, and that's the only way I can describe this last world. The rest of the game didn't have this problem though. I was really enjoying it up until the end. The levels are not only beautiful looking, but when the enemies are in a reasonable combination, it can be very satisfying to overcome a difficult level. I doubt most people will be playing the game to completion though, as most of the praise I've heard about the game gets thrown at the multiplayer, which I'd love to be able to talk about, but setting up a session was more difficult than expected. It makes sense since I don't live as close to the homies as I used to, and they got jobs and shit, so I'm gonna just take the L on this one. Before I end this section though, I'd really like to hear what the people who've experienced the endgame feel about it. I was really loving the game before that point, and even though it doesn't ruin the whole experience for me, I'd love to know if somebody else dreads getting to it when playing the game. This is one of the most important games in the franchise, as its visual style and gameplay would later be used and expanded upon by later games. It manages to even stay popular with people who weren't around for its original release. This is one of the only games from the franchise that was released on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console, and because of that, many people from both my generation and older ones have fond memories of it. That wasn't the only re-release for this one though. Not only was it included in the Bomberman collection for PC, which real quick, why doesn't it say that on this game's wiki page? I first noticed it wasn't there when I was looking for the release dates, and I not only knew that it should have been there, but it's very clearly the Bomberman from this box art that's on that game's box art. But fucking back on topic. It would also see a release on the PC Engine / TurboGrafx / Core Graphics Mini in 2020, possibly allowing even newer generations to be introduced to the game if scalpers haven't gotten to it yet. These re-releases are probably your best bet when it comes to playing this game, because holy shit, do not pay this much. I do recommend playing it though, even if only up to the second to last world. I kinda had the same moment I did with Lego Island when playing those levels. I finally understood all the praise up until the end. While the final world doesn't tank the experience for me, I'd be lying to you if I told you that part was in any way enjoyable for me. The rest of the game really overpowers that though, and if it wasn't for those last levels, I'd say it's the overall best game so far. It still stuck its landing, it just panicked in the air a little bit before it did. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. My opinion isn't exactly fact, and many people enjoy extremely difficult games, so it'd be fun to see that perspective. I'll see you niggas next time though.